Iowa Core Complex Communication. Before we begin, I just wanted to let you know I'm trying to kill two birds with one stone here. I want to show you a different type of presentation, and I want to do it in a way that is considered one of the ways you could do a flipped lesson or a flipped classroom or a blended learning type thing. So we're going to watch the video here and then take the quiz in the Google form that it's attached to. That quiz and your answers are going to be your entry ticket into our Plus One Monday training on Monday. So here it goes. When thinking about complex communication, I wanted to start off with an example of what's going on out there right now in the world, so we can see how all this ties together. So let's start with this. Suppose a climatologist in Anchorage is studying ozone data, maybe for the National Weather Service, and posting it in real time up on the web there. And that's part of his job. In the meanwhile, in Iowa, we have these ninth grade earth science students that have been looking at severe weather and ozone and how that all works and if it's tied together. And a student poses a question, hey, I wonder if there's a link. And the teacher jumps on this and says, hey, let's see if we can find a link or try and prove a link or prove no link exists between ozone and severe weather in the Midwest. And so they start doing their research. At the same time, in Los Angeles, there are 7th grade ELL, English Language Learner students, looking at like pollution's effects on the ozone. And they want to start going out and getting data and seeing how pollution, which is a reality for them, being in Los Angeles, affects everything in their environment. And so they want to also look outside of their environment as well, all at the same time as they're learning English. So let's put that example on pause and start talking about what complex communication really is. According to the Iowa Core, complex communication is one of those universal constructs like creativity and collaboration that we looked at earlier, where you have a successful sharing of information through multiple means. You have a message that's purposeful, clear, and concise, and it leads to an accurate exchange, which I think is a key term there, an exchange of information, not just a presentation, but a conversation that starts, ideas that get passed back and forth. And so they say that 21st century complex communication will include these three elements. They have to be a part of it to be complex communication. One, highlighted in red, is visual. Things like presentations or drawings or posters or diagrams or charts, things that people can see and that are created by the student. You have to include a digital component, maybe using Google Apps or shared docs to communicate there. Maybe there's blogging involved or creating of YouTube, iMovie. There's also that verbal and nonverbal interaction piece. So the things that you can maybe only get in a face-to-face kind of environment like with Hangouts or Skype, or if you watch some students give speeches or TED-style talks. There are some characteristics and traits of complex communication, and these should be the scaffolded teaching moments that happen every day in your class. And you can build these in slowly but surely, because there's a lot of skills here, and just taking them all at once probably won't be that successful unless you've scaffolded a little bit every day in your classes, or every once in a while in your classes started managing and teaching some of these skills before you get to a big project that involves all these skills. Things like negotiation or resolving conflicts, having meaningful and engaging interactions where the kids are talking and focused on the topic, interacting effectively with people of different cultures, not just the same culture, looking at what the kids are passionate about, what students want to focus on, where they can pour their energy into to define a key message there. A few other traits might include letting the students have autonomy in choosing how to communicate, what the communication process might be, which types of or forms of informative communication they're going to use in technology, to understand the different modes of communication and how that might apply to different audiences. And you see things like blogging and Hangouts as part of that. Here's some examples. Maybe students make a Google presentation. I've made this video from a Prezi. Maybe there's some other type of presentation technology they could use. Maybe they're posting posters around the school with QR code links, or they do an online poster like a s'more. Maybe it's a speech or a debate or an argument or a discussion. Possibly it's a video or a podcast where students can reply in comments to these things. So part of the complex communication is the ability to exchange ideas. So we also need to include the responding piece. Students can do this by listening and asking questions, questions directly related to the topic, by replying to blog posts, commenting on videos. Maybe you got a back channel set up during a presentation where kids can talk about the ideas in today's Meet or on Twitter. The big piece is the respectful discourse. We want to set that precedent right away. We want to make it more about the topic and not about the person presenting. Students can use these type of things to facilitate complex communication, like inquiry, being fascinated with something and want to research it. Students use discussion to refine what their learning outcomes need to be and how that can be tied to the core. Maybe speaking and listening in the core, or research or ELA pieces in the core and skills. Collaboration, we gotta allow collaboration. Like Ken Robinson says, collaboration is the stuff of learning. Allow them to choose the method of communication. And of course, any good teacher is going to do all the prep work beforehand, is going to do the heavy lifting beforehand, so when this lesson happens, the students are in charge of all the heavy lifting. Rubrics help to do that. So let's jump back into our example there of the Alaskan scientists, the ozone, the Iowa students looking at severe weather, and the LA students thinking about pollution. How could we incorporate complex communication into this mode, into this example? So maybe it looks something like this, and you might have a different idea. Iowa students collaborate to form questions that they can ask this Alaskan scientist via Google Hangout or email even. Maybe they collaborate on a Google Doc. Then individually, they write a blog post arguing their findings and citing their evidence. For the teacher, that means the teacher's got to start with a rubric that defines the learning outcomes of what they want to accomplish, how it ties to 9th grade science. I got to figure out some way of accountability so every student has their voice heard and they're accountable for their own voice. How to incorporate that collaboration and scaffold the skills so students are collaborating towards those goals. And maybe even give something about presentation guidelines, what's okay in a presentation, what's not okay. What can it look like for our LA students? Maybe those LA students, being English language learners, are going to respond to the Iowa blog posts, maybe using Google Translate to help them figure out what some of the words are. They develop and collaborate on a research experiment to study pollution levels in the Midwest and the West Coast. They can compare that data with national scientific data and continue to blog and talk about their findings and their arguments. What's that mean for that teacher? That maybe that teacher meets with small groups and gives them feedback on their use of English in blog replies. Students can also self-evaluate written language compared to spoken language. Maybe it becomes less written and more spoken language, where they do podcast replies, or something like a Voxer, where they Voxer replies to each other. Maybe eventually it leads to something like this, where Iowa and LA students can create collaborative YouTube videos talking about state recycling pollution control campaigns and present it to their U.S. senators via Skype. That's just one example of what that might look like. And it's on a huge scale here. And so I don't want you to get threatened by the size of that scale or the scope of that scale. But I do want you to get you thinking about this within your classroom when you start looking at adding complex communication. Number one thing is, who's doing the communicating in your class? Of course, we want to err toward the student autonomy side of things. I'm not saying we have to full swing let them do all the communication without any teaching, but you got to teach them how to communicate and how to do this communication effectively. Who's choosing the message here? I found that students are motivated when they have the choice of what kind of message that they get to present and research and be inquired into. Who's choosing the method of communication? I think as you get older, you can open that door. As the students get older, that is, you can open that door for them on how they want to choose the best method of communication. They maybe have to prove how that method of communication is most effective with the audience that they're trying to get. As the students get younger, maybe I only give them 3 or 4 different options after plenty of playtime with each of the options, so they can figure out which one speaks to them and which one they feel they can create the best type of product or the best type of learning environment. Number 4, what is the role of technology? So how can you incorporate that tech that we have? Number 5, if students are not choosing, how can we shift this to the students? How can we get our mindset from, I'm going to do this with my students, from I'm going to do this to my students. Just a different idea there. So that's the complex communication piece that we wanted to look at. Take a minute, fill out the Google form that's attached to this piece.